This is America, and this is Silicon Valley, specifically Stanford University, in the heart of that global hub of technology and innovation. When the social media boom hit here 20 years ago, it was all about adding friends. These days, the focus is on removing enemies. As companies here deploy new technologies to conflict zones around the world, is the United States moving away from traditional military power? I'll be back with more on that later. For now, here's Cyril Vanier in our Washington, D.C. studio.
Using artificial intelligence to track, target, and kill enemies is not a thing of the future. It's already happening. AI has been deployed in the U.S.'s war against Iran. It's been used to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And this is just the beginning. The same technology that can reply to your emails or give you life advice is being rapidly integrated into all facets of the U.S. military because it can do everything so much faster. Identify cyber weaknesses, select the right weapon for a strike, assess battle damage. For the Pentagon, this is where future battles will be won or lost.
America's AI ecosystem, America's global AI dominance, the world's leading AI models, the AI acceleration strategy, lead in military AI, effective AI transformations, an AI-first department, and an embrace of AI and other cutting-edge defense tech.
Now that's U.S. Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth earlier this year. The speech was 42 minutes long. He referenced AI 39 times. The Pentagon is spending hundreds of millions of dollars already to turbocharge military operations with AI, part of a massive military upgrade that the Trump administration is pushing for. And to pay for it, the White House is asking Congress for what could become the largest U.S. military spending package ever. Manuel Rapallo reports.
Mr. Secretary General.
At the Pentagon, the pitch is simple. America needs to modernize its military. And the Trump administration is asking Congress for $1.5 trillion to do it.
We are rebuilding a military that the American people can be proud of. One that instills nothing less than the unrelenting fear in our adversaries and confidence in our allies.
The Pentagon is calling it a generational investment. But this is not only about more troops, tanks, and fighter jets. The budget points toward a different kind of battlefield, where drones and artificial intelligence are more prominent. A two-pronged approach, made up of both traditional and new technologies, to sustain a long confrontation with a major power. And for Washington, one country looms over the debate: China.
China, China, and China. China, 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 China.
The White House says the U.S. military must be ready for any threat, but the increase comes at the expense of services that benefit the everyday American. The White House proposal includes cuts to everything from healthcare to affordable housing. Some of the biggest reductions will be targeting federal agencies like the Small Business Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency. It's estimated that the cuts will amount to somewhere around $73 billion, representing around 10% of non-defense spending. Critics say the budget protects the Pentagon while asking domestic agencies to absorb the pain. Proponents say the U.S. has spent years underinvesting, while adversaries have modernized, arguing the budget will have the added benefit of boosting the American economy.
Like the Reagan-era buildup, this investment will drive job creation. By conservative estimates, it could generate over 800,000 American jobs, many in manufacturing and engineering.
But even among Republicans, the question is how to pass such a large increase while also claiming fiscal discipline. Much of the plan depends on Congress, and that may be difficult, because this budget is not just a military blueprint. It's a test of whether Washington is willing to reshape the federal budget around a new era of confrontation. Manuel Rapallo, Al Jazeera, Washington.
In a few decades, the nature of combat on the front lines has totally changed. Fighter jets are no longer the sole attackers in the sky. Autonomous drones are now an active part of modern warfare. Military commanders poring over battlefield maps, that's a thing of the past. Today they're analyzing data and code. It's a similar evolution for frontline soldiers who once upon a time struggled for brief moments of communication with Central Command while they were in the field. And centuries-old tactics of trying to overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers are now being reimagined. Efficiency, effectiveness, that is the name of the game. So AI is enabling, assisting, speeding up wartime decisions. Al Jazeera's Alex Baird gives us a glimpse of how that works in practice.
Once upon a time on the battlefield, there was the fog of war. That's now been replaced by this. Artificial intelligence systems taking in information and processing it by the second. For the US Army, it goes by the name of Maven. Maven was born in 2017 in collaboration with Google, but after internal protests, the tech giant dropped his contract the next year. Finally, Palantir Technologies stepped in and brought the Maven smart system to life. This is how the US now approaches combat. In plain terms, the system absorbs up to 150 sources at once. We're talking satellites, drones, radar, geolocation feeds, all that sort of thing. Using all of that data, it automatically detects and classifies objects such as vehicles, weapons, buildings, and people. It draws yellow boxes around potential targets and blue boxes around friendly forces and no strike zones. A human still has to approve every strike, but everything that comes before that, Maven now does in seconds. We're talking up to 1,000 targeting recommendations every hour. Palantir says what once used to be the work of 2,000 intelligence officers now takes just 20. Tens of thousands of personnel across the US military now use that Maven system. There's no sign or reason that uptake will slow down. Operation Epic Fury was the absolute proof of concept, with the war with Iran now the largest AI-assisted US air campaign on record.
Joining us now, Mark Cancian is Senior Advisor with the CSIS Defense and Security Department, also a former Pentagon official. And Dan Grazier is a Senior Fellow and Director of the National Security Reform Program at the Stimson Center. That's Mark Cancian there. We've got our cameras right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Dan Grazier, AI recommends who to kill, how, when, with what weapon. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, no, not exactly. Warfare it's a human endeavor. Like, wars are fought by humans to serve human ends, and so it's important that we don't fully strip the humanity out of warfare. Otherwise, we're just not going to achieve the goals that we expect to out of this. So I think it's important for policymakers to be very careful about the kind of technology that we adopt, specifically with those kind of things which can be disrupted by a savvy enemy. And so if the military becomes too dependent on these kind of systems and then we lose access to them, then it's unclear whether or not the military is going to be able to revert back to the old methods of doing things to accomplish the mission.
Mark Cancian, I think targeting, AI used for targeting is one of the things that for lay people, myself and so many other people, is one of the scariest ways to use AI. And I want to be very clear to our viewers, AI is used for a great many things, right? Some of them far more innocuous, like AI will predict patterns and decide when it's time to send jets for maintenance and change spare parts, things like that. But when it comes to targeting, it's the same question that I asked Dan. AI is used to decide, crunch so much data that it decides who should be killed, what, where, when, and how. Is that a good thing?
Well, the part about it decides is not appropriate.
Right, okay.
As a research tool, it's great. I've seen it used, I've used it, and it's a great research tool. The way people might use a large language model for a paper. But if you just use what comes out of the large language model and hand that in at school, it's going to have a lot of mistakes in it. People will know that it was wrong. You really need to have that review by a human being to make sure that what's actually being executed is what you intended.
But we can all understand intuitively the argument, and you're making the parallel with school. If you hand in a paper that's been written by AI, it may have mistakes. The only consequence if you do that is you'll get a bad grade. The consequence with that in the battlefield is people could be wrongly targeted and killed.
Exactly, and that's why you need a human in the loop there to make sure that what's coming out.
But how do you catch the AI mistakes?
Because you can look at what the targets are and what the argument is for why they're picking that target and see if that makes sense.
Dan Grazier, AI has been used for targeting as part of the U.S.'s most recent and ongoing war against Iran. Day one of the war, every indication is that the U.S. struck an elementary girls' school in southern Iran, right? That is the indication, that's the reporting from U.S. media, and the U.S. they haven't acknowledged it, they deny that they did it, but they also haven't given any other explanation. This was their combat zone. I mean, is AI even and by the way, more than 170 people were killed, most of them schoolgirls. Was AI partly responsible for that?
It's entirely possible. While the war is ongoing, it's always very difficult for us to fully understand what really happened because, quite frankly, the truth is the first casualty in war, and so it's only with sober reflection afterwards that we really understand these kind of things. But that incident does illustrate a potential problem with this because when mistakes like that happen, however they happened, the United States instantly loses in the moral dimension of war, and it's important because if you lose in the moral dimension of war, you lose the war in general. We don't need to end up with a circumstance like happened in Vietnam where we won every battle but we ended up losing the war, and that's because the United States is really good in the physical dimension. We can do things like drop bombs and fire missiles, and some of them are eventually going to hit places like a school. But if that happens enough, then we lose in the moral dimension, and then in the war of public opinion, the war is ultimately lost.
Mark Kansian, how do you go about doing that as a military, preventing AI-generated mistakes? Because as you've said, they're going to happen. How do you get the benefits of AI, the efficiency and all of that, without the drawbacks?
Probably the best way is to have that human in the loop, where AI draws up a targeting package and a human looks at the package and then decides whether this makes sense. Does this look like a correct target, or is there something odd going on? And that's probably about as far as you go, because when people do the targeting, they make mistakes too. Like this school was likely a human mistake. That is, that the targeting package had not been updated for 5 years, and therefore, what had been a Revolutionary Guards building was now a school. They hadn't picked up on that, and that was likely a human problem.
Does it put more pressure, Dan Grazier? And by the way, you were a Marine, so you're also looking at this through the eyes of your previous experience in the field as a combat soldier. Would AI, in your view, put more pressure on human decision makers when they're approving or validating or denying AI-generated kill suggestions?
Very possibly, and I can imagine a set of circumstances where a commander is being fed a lot of prompts from a system like Maven that generates a whole bunch of targets, and the commander now has to sift through all of those in probably a rapid fashion, to avoid missing out on some of those like really quick opportunities that sometimes present themselves in the battlefield, and so I can see just task saturation happening as the prompts just continue to generate just a mass of potential targets, and that could be difficult for a commander to sift through.
So Al Jazeera's John Hendren, we sent him to Palo Alto to find out why and how Silicon Valley is now becoming a key player in global warfare.
For decades, America's military-industrial complex has been dominated by massive defense giants building missiles, tanks, and jet fighters. Today, America's software industry is increasingly shaping the future battlefield here in Silicon Valley. Companies here once built social networks and search engines. Now many are building battlefield software, autonomous systems, and artificial intelligence tools increasingly woven into modern warfare. Military planners say AI can process information faster than humans ever could. Critics worry warfare itself may be changing. The shift is visible across Silicon Valley. Startups once competing for users and app downloads increasingly compete for Pentagon contracts. Companies like Palantir, a maker of AI and surveillance systems, have gone from software maker to key military partners of the Pentagon. AI systems now compile huge amounts of data from satellite systems, drone feeds, and other sensors. And systems like Project Maven are now an intricate part of the Pentagon system. So one day, a battle between the U.S. and China over, say, Taiwan might play out something like this.
A fleet of AI-driven autonomous drones already stationed in the region by allies launch within seconds. Swarming together in coordinated attacks, they intercept incoming Chinese bombers and cruise missiles before they ever reach Taiwan. In the Pacific, a distributed force of unmanned submarines, stealthy drone warships, and autonomous aircraft that work alongside manned systems strike from unpredictable locations. Our AI-piloted fighter swarms engage Chinese aircraft in dogfights, responding faster than any human possibly could. This is the
As the tech guru in the Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops points out, AI can identify threats faster and make warfare more precise. But critics ask difficult questions. As algorithms take on larger roles, who becomes responsible when technology gets it wrong?
Something gets blown up, and you say, well, who said it was a good idea to blow this thing up? If the answer is all the humans are like, I don't know, I didn't do it, well, that's not a great outcome.
As artificial intelligence increasingly becomes integral to modern warfare, the engineers and investors shaping tomorrow's wars might well work right here. And the technology giants of the future might look less like traditional weapons makers and more like technology startups. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Palo Alto, California.
Mark Kansian, all this new tech, all this AI-driven military ability, it's coming from an industry that originally, and I want to say philosophically, had nothing to do with warfare or the military. But just by virtue of what their inventions can do, they now find themselves working hand in hand with the Pentagon. It's very new, and it's very rapid. Are you comfortable with all of that?
I don't think the military has a choice but to use these new tools. It's the same problem we see in the civilian economy, that AI tools will be revolutionizing the way we do manufacturing, the way we do design. We have to figure out how to use them in an effective way and in a way that helps human beings, doesn't hurt them. Same thing with the military. They've got to learn how to use these new tools. You can't ignore them. But learning how to use the tools is taking time. I think this first iteration, that is tools that in effect substitute for a large number of researchers, is a first look. And then looking downstream, that's when you get into weapons that might be controlled by AI, autonomous weapons, much more difficult there.
Is there a danger of any of these AI weapons ever going rogue? Because it's a question that's being asked for AI in other parts of AI applications, right? Will it at some point end up making decisions of its own volition without human interaction? Everybody understands that if it's an AI finger on the trigger, if it goes rogue, that's a bigger problem.
Well, yes, that is the ultimate danger with this, but I think that's somewhat down the road. I think in the near term, the bigger concern is, again, to remember that when you boil down war, a war is a conflict between two independent wills. And if we completely mortgage our future to these kind of digital systems, we create a really bad situation, because the scenario that the gentleman in the Hawaiian shirt was describing of drone swarms and all of that presupposes that the United States military has full unfettered control of the electromagnetic spectrum. And I promise you, in a war, the other side is going to find every advantage they can to defeat us. And they're going to disrupt those kind of networks. And so as we move forward, it's really important for policymakers here in Washington, when they make decisions about the military, to make sure that we don't have just a pure robot army, as it were, that depends on those kind of networks, because those networks will be disrupted. So we need to have kind of a dual-use military, one that functions without the need to depend entirely on those cyber-physical systems. We also need an analog force to back up the autonomous or robot army that everybody here in Washington seems so eager to create.
Listen to U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. For him, AI clearly is one of the priorities, maybe even the priority. Listen to this.
We are done running a peacetime science fair, while our potential adversaries are running a wartime arms race. Right now, from garage startups to factory floors to boardrooms across our nation, the question of how to harness innovation coming out of America's AI ecosystem is front and center, and rightfully so, because it has the potential to disrupt and transform every area of human endeavor. The same is true in the Department of War.
Mark Kansian, Pete Hegseth there is saying we have to get every morsel of AI innovation that we can out of our U.S. AI ecosystem. And he's framing it, and more broadly, the U.S. and the Trump administration have been framing it as almost an existential challenge, especially in their rivalry with China. Do you agree with that framing of it? Do they have any choice, any alternative but to go headlong into AI?
Well, there are choices about how you go into AI and how you apply it, but they have no choice about being able to use AI. And again, I'd make the analogy to the civilian economy. If a company said, we're not going to use AI, they would likely be left behind by companies that do. How you use it and whether you use it effectively is critical. And one of the things that Hegseth is also talking about is the Pentagon's traditional difficulty in moving science and new technologies from the lab into the field. And not just with AI, but many, many other instances, they get caught in what's called the valley of death. That is,
what's that?
Trying to leave the laboratory, an interesting, potentially helpful technology, and then getting it into a system that's out in the field. The system, the technology changes hands, from the scientists and the engineers, handing it off to the developers and the warfighters. Very often it gets lost.
Can I give you a little example of a fight between one of the major AI players and the Pentagon? So Anthropic is one of those companies that develops AI tools for the US government, and right now they're in a legal battle with the Pentagon, and it's currently playing out in a Washington, D.C. courtroom, actually today. A couple of months ago, the U.S. Defense Department designated Anthropic a, quote, supply chain risk. Why? Because Anthropic had red lines. It banned the Pentagon from using its AI tool Claude for two things: mass domestic surveillance of Americans and fully autonomous weapons systems. So that's weapons that operate without human approval. And the Pentagon wanted unrestricted use of Claude. Anthropic is currently challenging in court its designation by the Pentagon as this supply chain risk. Previously, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei said that the company could, quote, not in good conscience, authorize the Pentagon's demands for unrestricted use of its technology. Dan Grazier, they're fighting because Anthropic said you can't mass surveil Americans and you can't deploy fully autonomous, you can't use our tools, Claude, to deploy fully autonomous self-triggering weapons, essentially. And the Pentagon said, well, actually, that's a risk to us. We want full powers. What does that tell you about the Pentagon's intentions and how they intend to use Claude?
Well, that is a little disturbing. It's, I don't like the idea of the government using these kind of tools to mass surveil American citizens, particularly ones that haven't done anything to deserve that kind of treatment. But I think this incident highlights an inherent challenge just of the national security establishment here in Washington. Like the defense industry is made up of private companies. And these are private companies that, they get to make decisions and set their own policies about how the business, how their business is going to be run.
But Anthropic's being punished for that.
Exactly. And so this is a challenge for all these companies that they're going to have to go through. It's do you want these lucrative contracts, which is one of the reasons why Silicon Valley is moving into this space now, is because they've learned over the years that like 40 years ago we were talking about $500 hammers that should have cost $10. And so Silicon Valley's learning that, if you do business with the Department of War, Department of Defense, that you get to charge a big premium and make a lot of money. But in order to do that, you're going to have to dance to the government's, the beat of the government's drum. And as Anthropic is figuring out that there are some pitfalls with that. So these are decisions that all CEOs in all of these sectors are going to have to grapple with if they want to do business with the Pentagon.
Mark Kansian, you've told us several times in this discussion, AI is a tool and it depends how you use it. You've got to try and weed out the mistakes, catch and prevent mistakes. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. What does it tell you that the Pentagon is furious at Anthropic for just placing a few limits on how that tool is being used?
Well, those limits look pretty reasonable to me, and I think to Dan also, because we don't want the government or the Department of Defense doing either of those activities. I think part of it is also a concern that they don't want Anthropic to have a veto on how the tools are used in other instances. They don't want, for example,
But mass surveillance of Americans is illegal anyway. So why would you kick out Anthropic of your entire military system because they're preventing you from doing something you're not even allowed to do?
That part I think is perfectly reasonable. But if it means that then if Anthropic has certain kill switches in their product, who's to say that they couldn't come in and say, listen, our staff just voted and they don't support the war in Iran, so we're going to turn off your targeting system.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. That's all the time we have for today. Mark Kansian, Senior Advisor with the CSIS Defense and Security Department. You're also a former Pentagon official. And Dan Grazier, Senior Fellow and Director of the National Security Reform Program at the Stimson Center. Both of you, by now, are friends of the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And that's all from the team here in Washington. And from me, Cyril Vanier. My colleague Rob Matheson will be with you from tomorrow. And for now, it's back to John Hendren and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha, where I'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Cyril. And remember, you can catch up again on this episode and all our previous ones by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search Al Jazeera English. We'll be back again on Wednesday at 18:30 GMT or 11:30 a.m. Pacific if you're here on America's West Coast. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.